the big Good evening and welcome to the April 6th, 2023 West Sacramento Planning Commission meeting. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter along with the request to speak cards. A reminder to everyone that request to speak cards should be completed and turned in to the clerk prior to the completion of any staff presentation. For those speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please write item 3 on your card. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. So we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Commissioner Jackson, will you lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Salute and pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Nation. Indivisible. Liberty and justice.
Okay, so we'll start with item 1, swearing in of planning commissioners. I think I might be the only one.
Yes, for the record, I think all planning commissioners were present tonight. We're here at the orientation and thus were able to be sworn in except Acting Chair Sablan. So Tanya will now swear you in and then we can move on to our next item.
Okay, I provided a copy. Okay, so I
Teresita Sablan,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies,
and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and alliance
and I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California,
to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I will take this obligation freely
that I will take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Delgado is ill, so he will not be here tonight, but we are fortunate that our alternate member, Mr. Anderson, was with us tonight and will serve in as a full role tonight in tonight's meeting. And then we will need to swear in Mr. Delgado at our upcoming meeting, just presuming he is well to attend.
And just briefly before moving on, I think we have several or many new commissioners today. So we'll just go down the line if you can introduce yourself and what area or district you are from in West Sac. And we'll start with Commissioner Squires.
I'm Commissioner Irvin Squires. I'm in District 2, over by where the railroad tracks cross, not on the other side of where the Safeway used to be.
I'm Brenda Wong. I'm also part of District 2.
Good evening. I'm Dolores Oliveros. I'm a part of District 4.
Preston Jackson. I wish I knew a district right now. I think it's 4. I think.
no, this is bad. I'm Tammy Linker, and I would like to say it's District 1. Nobody asked.
I'm Ron Anderson, and I believe I'm District 3, but I'm not totally sure.
I'm Teresita Sablan. I go by Chech, and I am also not sure. I think I'm District 3 or 4. You know, it's a new thing for West Sacramento, but I'm in Old West Sac. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone, and welcome to the public. So we'll move on to item 2, election of Planning Commission Chair and Vice Chair for 2023. So we'll start with Chair, and I will open up the floor for nominations. And just clarification, do we need seconds on nominations, or?
Yes, we should have a second, and just by tradition, the chair and vice chair can be anyone. It's entirely up to the commission. I asked Commissioner Sablan at least to be acting chair for now, just because somebody had to be chair to get the meeting started. Because we have, obviously it's unusual to have this many, new folks all at once, but we're excited to get going. So we would like a nomination and a second, and then we will then take all those nominations and then vote. And then if whoever becomes chair and vice chair, if that means you need to do some musical chairs up there, please do that. And then whoever becomes chair will then take over the rest of the meeting.
I nominate Chuck Sablan. I'm sorry, for chair of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Yep, we have a nomination and a second.
Would there be any other nominations?
Okay, so seeing none, I will ask the Clerk Flores to do the roll call, please.
Commissioner Squires,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Commissioner Olivares,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Linker,
Aye.
Chair Sablan.
Aye, and thank you for the vote of confidence, everyone. And we'll turn it over to vice chair nominations. Any nominations for vice chair?
Chair, I'd like to nominate Preston Jackson as vice chair.
Okay, we have a nomination for Commissioner Jackson as vice chair.
Second?
We have a second from Commissioner Squires. Any other nominations for vice chair? Seeing none, Clerk Flores, can you please do the roll call?
Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Linker,
Aye.
Commissioner Squires,
Aye.
Commissioner Olivares,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Chair Sablan.
Aye. Okay. Now we have Vice Chair Preston Jackson. Congratulations. Okay, with that, we'll turn to item number 3, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission. The commission is prohibited from discussing issues not on the agenda brought to them at this time. According to state law, items must be first noticed on the agenda before any discussion or actions. And I believe we have at least one item on this.
We have Robin Davis.
Good evening, Ms. Davis. Welcome.
Hi.
And I'll just remind you of 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Robin, and I live in my 160 square foot semi-off-grid tiny home on wheels on my undeveloped residential property here in West Sacramento. I've been appealing to the West Sacramento City Council, to the West Sacramento Community Development Department, and to Sacramento Regional Sewer throughout the past 2.5 years regarding a tiny home on wheels ordinance and how to make it affordable by creating options to impact fees based on square footage. We wanted the opportunity to enlighten this commission on all the great ways a tiny home on wheels ordinance can help our city, and so we included several documents in our written public comment, including how to write a tiny home on wheels ordinance written by attorney Jennifer Lavini, who helped Santa Cruz County pass their tiny home on wheels ordinance, which is also in the email to reference, so you could see a real-life example of a county who is now leading in this movement. We also included information from the Tiny Home Industry Association, led by Dan Fitzpatrick, who was a former city manager and policymaker. The main benefits of implementing a tiny home on wheels ordinance include to more quickly increase housing density with existing infrastructure and without sprawl. This can be done with implementing FOWs as ADUs, primary residences, and in cluster communities. This creates another path to home ownership for disadvantaged communities and creates a much-needed starter home option, since only 7% of what has been built in the entire United States in the past decade has been homes under 1,400 square feet. Homes have been getting bigger while families have been getting smaller. Supply has not met demand or the changing demographics for some time. Tiny homes reduce carbon footprint by using less resources to build and to maintain. They use only 25% of the average traditional home's utility usage, produces over 5,578 pounds less CO2 each year compared to the average home, and can lower the greenhouse effect by 36%. The state already recognizes tiny homes on wheels as habitable housing structures, and the state allows them to be counted towards your RHNA numbers. So every reported tiny home on wheels can be counted towards your low to moderate housing needs allocation required by the state. The average cost to build an affordable housing unit in California is over, on average, $350,000 of taxpayer money on the low end, but the cost to the taxpayer by allowing a tiny home on wheel is zero, while creating a more efficient, affordable, and attainable low to moderate income housing inventory. Lastly, by implementing an innovative housing option like this, puts West Sac at a higher chance of getting much needed state funding by showing we are being creative with our solutions, which the state encourages. I still have high hopes that West Sacramento, a state-recognized pro-housing city, will implement this ordinance, not only so that I may come into compliance, but allow others to have more diverse housing options in addition to getting more people off the streets. I request this commission to help move this policy proposal forward by requesting a workshop or by putting this on a future agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4.
Oh, we have one more speaker. Andrea Montano.
Good evening, Commission and staff. I just want to say thank you for being here and for being a part of this new commission. Really excited to see what's going to happen in the 2023 year. I too am a tiny house dweller in the County of Sacramento and an advocate for the Tiny Home Industry Association. And I've been working for about 2 years across the state of California to help implement some of these ordinances in other counties and cities, and have happily shared that information in a future workshop if needed. I wanted to enlighten you guys, since you're new to West Sacramento, some of the information that we have coming forward for the public, just to kind of give you some general consensus of who it is that we're serving and protecting in the city of West Sacramento. There are approximately 54,000 people living here today. The approximate age of 30% of the population is under 20, and 27% of the population is over the age of 50, totaling about 57% of the total population. Your income, your median income household is approximately $77,000 per year, with about 14,000% of the population living in poverty, notably 20% higher on average compared to the Sacramento region and the state of California. Per average, per household average, there are approximately 18,966 households with about 2 to 3 persons per household, which make up about 48% of your households that are single income households here in West Sacramento, meaning 1 or 2 people with 1 income per household make up 48% of that population. And so when we're talking about RHNA, which is the regional allocation of housing needs that the state sets forth for each jurisdiction in California, only 237 units for low and very low income housing have been built in the last decade in West Sacramento between 2013 and now. In comparison, 1,848 moderate and above moderate housing income units have been built between 2013 and now, meaning there's a total of over 2,000 new units, equaling 49% of the total remaining RHNA that must be allocated for low and very low income housing between now and 2029, which is the sixth amendment update that your housing cycle is currently in. Where are those other 2,000 new housing units going to be built and when? If it takes 3 to 5 years for us to come up with a development with 2 phases of 64 and 77 units, what happens to the rest, minus the 140-something units that are being built between now and the next 5 years? Where are they going to live? We have people that are falling under, into our unhoused communities faster than we can build. And tiny homes and tiny homes on wheels are solutions that we love to bring forward now. So I'd love to bring more information to you guys at a later time, and I hope that you can accept our offer to having a presentation at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montana. And I know we can't discuss this, but I do think some of the commissioners would be interested in hearing more on this in a future agenda.
And Ms. Davis did also provide a lot of information in writing, which I believe we relayed to the Planning Commission earlier today. If you didn't get that, or if you need a hard copy, can let us know. This has been a matter that has been before the City Council numerous times. So we're at staff level, we're sort of awaiting if there's direction to come, it would come from the council.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley. Moving on to item 5, disclosure of ex parte communications. Do any of the commissioners have anything to disclose?
Does everyone know kind of what we mean by this also? If anyone is curious, we can have Mr. City Attorney give you a Cliff Notes version.
So basically this means, do any of you have anything to report about speaking with anybody associated with the one item that's on the agenda for tonight? Did anybody discuss this with either the applicant or anyone else?
See none. Thank you for the explanation on that. Oh, did you have something, Vice Chair?
No, I was just going to say, just anyone in connection with the proposal, correct?
Well, it could be someone associated with the project, or maybe another interested party. It's really anyone regarding the matter here. It's less critical who they were, it's about what it was. And just for the record, it's okay to have done that. It just needs to be disclosed, here at the meeting.
Yeah, and I think we've generally taken a fairly broad approach at the commission, and if you speak to members of the public or just anyone, your neighbor, we generally disclose that just for the record.
Well, yeah, I've spoken with members of the community about this issue and had a couple conversations, so.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda, it's consideration and approval of the March 16th, 2023 commission meeting minutes. I think I was the only one at that meeting, but you can still vote on this.
I'll make the motion to approve the March 16th, 2023 commission meeting minutes.
We have a motion by Commissioner Olivares,
And I'll second that.
second by Vice Chair Jackson.
Commissioner Olivares,
Aye.
Commissioner Squires,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Linker,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jackson,
Aye.
Chair Sablon.
Aye. Thank you. With that, the motion passes and the minutes are approved. We'll turn to item 7. It's the public hearing regarding proposed River Park Development Agreement, amendment number 1, and we have Mr. Laffey presenting on that.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. Congratulations on all your appointments. My name is Seamus Slaffy. I'm a senior planner with the city, and I'm here to present on this item tonight, the River Park Development Agreement, the First Amendment to that development agreement. So I'll start off with a little bit of background on Southport and development in Southport. So this goes back to the Southport Framework Plan, which was approved back in 1995, later amended in 1998. That approved 4 village-oriented mixed-use developments. The one that we're talking about tonight is the Southeast Village, and the 2 ones in the north, the Northeast and Northwest, have predominantly built out. And the Planning Commission a few weeks ago heard an item regarding the Southwest Village. That's the Yarborough project. And the Southport Framework Plan, the environmental impact report for that assumed 16,109 dwelling units in Southport. So the River Park project was approved in 2008. It was 452 acres that was approved, undeveloped land in the Southeast Village. The approval in the development agreement before you tonight is 2,284 residential units. That's what was approved in 2008. And as part of that approval, there was an environmental impact report, a general plan amendment, rezoning, a master design guidelines for the project, and the development agreement, which is a 15-year term. That development agreement was approved in July of 2008, so that's up this summer. So here is the land use map. You can see most of the Southeast Village is included in the River Park project. There's a few properties that are not included, but most of them are. And you have the higher density residential more towards the center along a park. And then you have on the eastern side a larger open space area and parks. And then you have lower density residential on the peripheral. So since that was approved, the city has updated the general plan back in 2016, and along with that, the zoning was updated. But you can see here that the zoning in Southport, especially the Southeast Village, largely resembles what was approved in 2008. You have a lot of higher density residential and low density residential in that area. And this is also was provided to a hard copy tonight, and it's available online. So if anybody, if you want to look at the PDF of that, I can get it for you offline. So since that was approved back in 2008, there's been quite a big change out in that area, and that is the Southport Levee Improvement Project. So there's a new levee that is set back off of where the old levee used to be. So South River Road used to be the old levee that largely does not exist down there anymore. You have a new levee set back from that widens the river channel. So this exhibit here shows the old satellite image, and then the line is essentially where that new levee is. So the project that got approved really, today, a good portion of that is part of the river. So here's some aerials, some drone footage that was taken during that construction of that project. This is looking north towards the River Park site. Here's another one. This was a few years ago. That is the River Park site. You can see downtown there in the distance. So this is during the construction of the levee. This is looking south. And then one last one here. This is when the levee was largely completed. So you can see the new levee, and then to the right, you can see where South River Road was, and it got degraded there for a section so that there could be more the wider river channel. And then here's the latest aerial. You can see that area, that's the wider river. So just wanted to provide that background. That's a change since 2008. And the reason why I bring that up is the applicant and the city are working on amendments to the development agreement and the project to accommodate those, those changes, reflect those changes in going forward. So the development agreement has quite a lot of key terms. It establishes certain requirements for the developer and the city, which include a master affordable housing agreement, parks and open space, construction for various off-site improvements, funding for infrastructure, master plans for drainage, water, sewer, traffic, requires funding for levee improvements, for public safety, for schools, and it also had a full waiver of fee vesting. So a lot of these are, fairly important for the city. Development agreements are not required. It's something a developer can request. So the reason for requesting a development agreement is they get vested. So if anything changes in the future, say the city wants to, change requirements, they're vested in what they have in the development agreement. So it provides surety to a developer long-term. But for that surety, the city gets items in return. So there's negotiation back and forth, which takes a long time. And so the city can get off-site improvements, extra funding, things that we wouldn't have a nexus for. For an impact, you have to have a nexus for, and with the development agreement, anything's on the table. If we need funding for something that's completely unrelated to the project, we can put it in the development agreement if the project developer is amenable to that as part of the negotiation. So the proposed development agreement would, before you tonight, they would extend it by a year, and then also another year at the city manager's discretion. So until July 18th of 2024, and then up to 2025, and that provides a little bit of extra time for the city staff and the developer to work on updates to the project to incorporate changes to that area since 2008. The amendment requires city council approval, so we're looking for a recommendation tonight, and then this would ultimately go to the city council later this spring. So that concludes my remarks. David Tilley and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laffey. Before we move to opening the public comment, do any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Laffey or Mr. Tilley this time?
As I understand it, this also includes the agreement to include the environmental impact report in this approval. Does that get modified at any point? And what triggers a change in the EIR with so many of the changes that will have to be accomplished as a result of the levy?
Yeah, so the action tonight would preserve the status quo for another year, potentially 2 years. Any future changes to the project would require additional environmental analysis. The applicant is working with staff on a supplemental environmental impact report that would need to be circulated for public review and included as any part of any action in the future by the Planning Commission and the City Council.
So it would be pretty likely then that we would see another EIR or an amendment to it.
Yeah, any changes to the project require an environmental review, and when you have significant impacts, we'd have an environmental impact report.
Will that be triggered by density?
It could be a whole variety of factors that could.
That's one of many. Yeah. Okay.
Any other? Commissioner Squires.
I have a question. So all the work on the river, all the grading work and the opening up to widen the river, that didn't affect the EIR at all?
So the Southport Levee Improvement Project had its own environmental document certified.
so they don't overlap or anything like that? I mean, they
And that-
came onto the land
Yeah,
that
so-
was approved.
Once, yeah, because that environmental document in 2008 was certified, that's what we're working on right now. There's substantial changes to the footprint of the project because of the levee, and also other, modifications. So that's something that's being worked on right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. You just said that there's been substantial changes to the project because of the levee. And now, in the materials that we were given, it says that in the original agreement, I believe was for 452 acres. And then, but the levee improvements then, did that then shrink the size of the project?
That's
And then-
correct, yeah.
Okay. And then at what point then does this fall outside of the scope of the original project in terms of the original agreement that was struck in 2008? Because it seems to me that with such a drastic reduction in the area, that then that would mean that there would be substantial changes, like you said. So at what point does the level of changes negate that agreement? Or is there a point? I don't know.
Well, the agreement is tantamount to a contract. And so it does have a term, and it runs through that term. And so the project could proceed under the terms of that agreement, assuming that the project remained substantially the same as what was included in that agreement. In this particular area, this project has been, I think, uniquely affected by the levee improvements in this area. And the other aspect of this, why the project footprint is a little bit smaller, is the current landowner interest is not the same party that had the project approved originally. So they acquired most of the land that the prior developer had, but not all of it. So there's a lot of factors here that have necessitated reworking some aspects of the project on a smaller footprint. Factoring in the levee, which in this case, fortunately, is a positive thing because we have much better flood protection than we had back then. So in this scenario, I think what you're kind of one step ahead right now, because the kinds of things you're talking about is what we're working on and will ultimately be bringing to the Planning Commission in the future. So for now, I think the term I've been using a lot of this is sort of, we need to work on some more reconciliation. So much time has passed. Some of the things in the current development agreement don't really make sense anymore. So, but we need a little more time, and we are working in parallel with the landowner to update that development agreement and rework the project, and then bring it back in front of the community and the Planning Commission and Council for further consideration. So this project is sort of in a bit of unique circumstances compared to some of the other large projects that are in the works in Southport. So in this sense, extending this development agreement tonight, as Seamus says, does preserve status quo, and then does allow us to then build upon that document in further negotiations with the landowner, and then bring everything forward to the Planning Commission as a package, including some fresh environmental review done under current syntax. When we look at these, it's amazing how much has changed, in this time period. And it's why Seamus put together the PowerPoint that he did, just to sort of do a quick history lesson from 1994 to try to get us up to present day. Because I think all that, and Matt, I hope all that was helpful contextually for the commission. And some of the drone photos of the levee improvements in that particular part of town I thought were quite striking. There was nowhere else along the levee in Southport that was like that, had a true setback levee in that regard. So it was a unique area. That bend in the river actually created a lot of scouring and actually worsened some of the flood protection that we had previously. So that's why they sort of, and if you saw it this winter, it was definitely inundated the way it was supposed to be. So everything worked. So that was nice. So you're one or two steps ahead, Commissioner Jackson, but those are good questions because those are all things that will be coming before you at a later date.
So just for my own clarification then, so then what we're being asked to do tonight then is just to preserve the status quo, since this agreement, the current agreement is set to expire. And so we're just being asked to preserve the status quo to give the developer, I'm assuming, in the city time to work out a revised plan for the project, or?
That really is it in a nutshell, yes. So this will buy us a little bit more time. We've been working on this for quite a while, a couple of years now with the landowner. So we're fairly well down the path on, at least some of the concept changes that they want to make, given that some of the project footprint is now under the levy. But it's also the silver lining of this is an opportunity to look at the project, under more today's, thinking. A lot has changed quite a bit since even since we did general plan in 2016. Some substantive things have changed in state law and other matters that definitely having us look at things a little bit differently than we used to. So, but the way you summarized it was perfect. That's exactly what we're asking for you tonight.
Okay, I guess I just want to make sure before we take a vote that at least for my peace of mind, that moving forward, so that any subsequent changes that may take place, say we go ahead and we give, yep, we're good with this, we go ahead and move it on to city council goes and approves it, and then once the revisions and things like that are made and the project is updated, then does that then come back to the commission for approval, or does the project just go ahead and just move forward at that point?
No, it absolutely will need to come to the planning commission and the city council for final action. I anticipate them needing general plan amendments, rezoning, a lot of kind of a similar package to what was approved in 2008. We won't be totally starting from scratch, but it will be a similar package of amendments needed to effectuate it. But really, what I try to encourage all my commissioners, those are the mechanisms to effectuate the project. What's most important is the project, and what benefits does it provide, to the community and the surrounding neighborhood. That's really, I think, what's most important. But there's obviously the mechanics of it too. But no, you will see. You will see the whole package once it's ready and after the environmental document has been circulated, and we'll workshop it a few times, probably before the planning commission. It's kind of a lot to digest all in one night. So we would anticipate workshopping it at least a couple of times at the planning commission, before we're ready for some type of action. So the planning commission will have a lot of time on this one once it's ready.
Okay. So just a couple more things. So then I'm then guessing then that on the revised project, that the project probably would not be the 2,284 units, hopefully, since it's much smaller. Because I know that there was a couple of because I noticed on the new map, on the site from the old map where there was supposed to be a school there was crossed out. Now it's supposed to be medium density housing.
Yeah,
so that was kind of concerning.
Yeah, I worked on River Park originally, so I have probably more history than anybody cares to know about it. But can we put the PowerPoint back up, the one with their land use map on it? I want to talk about what I call the notch on there, because that will help me respond to your question, Commissioner Jackson. One more, keep going. There you go, that one. So kind of toward the lower left-hand side, there's sort of that kind of rectangular notch, if you will, there. Up until the very last minute of this project, that was about 40 acres of property, and it was part of the project. It was considered in the EIR, and that was roughly 40 acres of property there. Really at the 11th hour, the underlying property owner there actually pulled out of the project. So we did scramble quite a bit to adjust things to take out, that notch, which you're correct, did include a school site at that time. We would fully expect that, remember, part of this property is now under the levy, so it's not quite 40 acres anymore. but we would fully expect that if the overall River Park project were to proceed, that property would ultimately come in, with it. But it's not under the current landowner's control. So, and this was a bit of a bone of contention, I remember, when it was going through the approvals, because it appeared at least that developer at the time, which is not the current party, was sort of sloughing off a school site onto somebody else. That's not the case. And where schools are going to go and how many in what format is still very much, I think, an evolving question in Southport right now. Also, we are working on that in the context of some of the other projects, and the school district, I get the sense, is trying to figure out, long term, what will their needs be, as enrollment actually has been declining in the last few years, and it remains to be seen if that will continue to happen or not. But there is another school site in the Liberty project, and there is another school site in the Yarborough project. So it does remain to be seen if one will be needed here. Part of that really will come down to kind of which projects proceed first, and then what kind of student generation they start to have. So that's definitely takes a crystal ball on some of that stuff. But this notch here explains part of the discrepancies with what was in the EIR, because this came out literally at the 11th hour, so we didn't revise the EIR. And then the other thing that was happening at that time, also why the unit count went down, was at this time we were starting to at least barely get a sense of what some of our flood protection needs were going to be and how serious of an issue that was. So at that time, we did actually have that landowner and developer essentially put a 500-foot, essentially buffer around the river edge in anticipation of needing to do levee improvements in that area. And in the end, it turned out to need to be actually much more than that, especially right at the bend there. So there's been a lot of circumstances along the way that have affected this project, and hence why, especially with the new landowner, they are proposing to rework some things, because there's been a variety of things that have occurred that are just circumstances. They're nobody's fault. Why they need to rework some stuff. So, but the notch there was something that got taken out last minute, so we kind of scrambled to get this exhibit together. And I see the date, June 2008. Wow, that was a while ago. But I sat at that very podium and discussed the notch, and that underlying landowner, that was certainly his prerogative to pull out, and that was between him and the developer at that time, but that was certainly his option, and we certainly respected that.
Yeah, and one last question. First of all, thank you for that levee improvement, because my house is not that far from there, so I really do appreciate that.
I hope it's more than 500 feet from here.
Yes, it is. But in the presentation you mentioned something, the fever for the waiver for fee vesting. What is that?
Yeah, so any new development, they have an impact fee they pay to the city, paying for their impact to the city. So yeah, police, fire, school district fees, those can be quite substantial. And every year they go up with inflation. And a lot of development agreements, not this one, but a lot of them, they'll lock their fees in when the development agreement is approved. So, 10, 15 years later, they're paying fees that are a lot lower than market rate. So this one is waived. So any homes or development down there will be paying the current going rate for impact fees.
Yeah, and that's for city fees, where we don't control vesting on, for example, school fees. This is a significant portion of this development agreement. We've had some projects here in town that were approved in the 90s, and they're still building out today, and they're paying impact fees really from the late 90s. They've been indexed, but also what it means is that if there are new impact fees that come along the way, they may not be subject to those. So the full waiver of fee vesting in this development agreement was one of the most important pieces of it. No matter how you slice it, a project of this size, will take several years, to build out, and those impact fees are paid on a per building permit basis. So you can imagine how many years it might take before a project is largely done. And if they're paying, 10 or 15-year-old fees, it's just not going to get us there with the way, costs tend to escalate for infrastructure and other matters. So this is a very important plank in this development agreement as well as in Yarborough. It would be something that I would think that the city council would and staff would insist upon in any future development agreement as well. We've learned our lesson from some of the development agreements done in the very early days of the city, where I don't think anybody anticipated that, like Newport Estates, which was approved in 1998, they're still building it now, as an example. Or even out in Southport Business Park, another example. So that's an important piece of this, and it was something we negotiated and we would insist upon remaining in any future development agreement.
Any other questions from the commission? So I'll just remind the commission. So we're just doing questions of staff, and then we'll hear public comment, and then we'll bring it back to deliberate.
I just have one question about the master affordable housing agreement that you said was required. What is that? Is that like a percentage or not agreed upon yet?
Not agreed upon yet.
And who determines that?
So the developer would work with our housing division, and then that would ultimately require, I believe, city council approval. But
yeah, so we do have an inclusionary housing ordinance. The standard rule is they provide 10% of their units affordable, and there's some further breakdowns of that. That is the standard requirement. If there's any proposal to do anything other than that, then that requires city council approval. I would anticipate a project of this size with this kind of scale would probably have a mixture of strategies to help meet that obligation, because there's some economy of scale on a project of this size, versus you're going to see a 10-unit project coming up at an upcoming meeting. Totally different animal, how we might do affordable housing in a 10-unit project versus something, with over 2,000. But that's a standard thing. They will need to comply with that, and they will ultimately need to get city council approval, and the council has full discretion over that game plan. Affordable housing is inordinately complex, but that's the upside to larger projects, is it gives us some more options in that regard.
No further questions from the commissioners? Okay, so I'm going to open the public comment portion of the hearing. I believe we have some public comments, right?
We have Michael Smith.
My name is Michael Smith. I am the representative of River Park, and I wanted to come this evening and introduce myself and answer any questions you may have. They seemed like they covered everything in great detail, but
yeah, thank you. Do any of the commissioners have questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you.
Danny Langford.
Good evening, new commissioners. My name is Danny Langford. And to give you some background, because I was at every meeting for 5 straight years on this project and the other big projects out in Southport, didn't miss a one. And what he didn't mention was the resolution that Save Our City came into with the city, because we had enough signatures to put on the ballot to stop any development unless the community voted on it as a whole, just like they do in Davis. At the last minute, they came up with a resolution, and I have a copy for each of you because it's not being honored by our city, and it's very frustrating. I spoke at last night's meeting on the general plan, and it's very obvious that this developer wants 2,700 homes on 139 less acres. I live there's a block of homes, we're all rural residential or rural estate, between Harmon and Village Parkway. This will directly impact us. The 2,284 acres, or homes, on 139 less acres is ridiculous enough. It does not maintain rural residential and open space buffers between villages. Rural residential and rural estate zoning designations are not to be converted into urban density residential designations. This project does that. It's a new developer, they need to go back to the starting block. They need to start all over again. The fact that they're trying to put this through really upsets me because it's going to impact all of us that live out there. I am not against growth. I am for smart growth. And we are not doing smart growth. We are not making villages that none of the projects that have gone forward, Bridgeway Island, Bridgeway Lakes, none of those have the villages that are in the Southport Framework Plan. I've asked for years now, and I brought this up, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional again, for the number of rooftops that we currently have in Southport. And I want to know, the city, Mr. Tilley, has not given me that information. 16,109 rooftops is supposed to be the max. He called this resolution last night nothing more than a piece of paper. This is a binding document with the city to uphold the things to protect those of us that live there. We need buffers. For instance, Liberty. They've worked with us. No other developer has worked with the community that lives in that area. They're giving us half-acre buffers, not River Park, and I am respectfully requesting that you deny their out for the extensions because I feel, and a lot of us feel out there, they need to go back to the drawing board. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Larry Langford.
Don't start me yet. I gotta pass these. And while I'm doing it, may I ask real quick regarding something that was said tonight?
You could speak to him after the meeting.
You can fire away. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Congratulations or condolences for your position as a commissioner on this city. Not, you'll figure out later on how it goes. So real quickly, the 16,109 rooftops out in Southport by the EIR, we would like to know how many are currently out there. They both said about a school facility and public safety. Those are supposed to go in before occupancy of any dwelling residential areas that we have. That's in the framework. It's also in the housing element plan. Before occupancy. The other question, real quick question I have was school facilities. Who's going to build them? That's the question. Our school district is bonded out. They have no money to build a school, let alone even a small little classroom. They have no money to build any schools. Also, you guys have in your report for tonight, there's some errors down here on number 7, the incorrect numbers. The city council last night said 373.5 acres. Yours says 452. Something else we saw last night was possibly 373.5 acres up to 2,708 residences. On the map from 2017, we counted the acreage up and it came out to 320. And I think we just heard that the developer only owns currently 313 acres. This is not the same project that had the developmental agreement. Now I'll go to my statement if you don't mind. Good evening. Projected growth for 2040 is going to be 87,999 total people in West Sacramento. I'm asking you to pull the River Park project update from tonight's, or that's last night. I'm asking you to not give River Park an extension on the developmental agreement. This project was originally 452 acres and approximately 2,208 rooftops. The EIR was done in 2006. Since then, as they stated, the setback levies have been built and they need to be taken into consideration for this project. This project needs to start all over in the process from the very beginning. The info update last night said 373 up to 2,708 rooftops. Tonight's meeting tonight, we gave you those numbers. I believe they need to have a new EIR a new developmental agreement, and a traffic impact study, because the traffic impact study the most recently done was in 2016. If you guys look at it, you'll see what most of them are unacceptable. By putting 2,200 more homes out there, you're looking at over 4,000 more vehicles. You all have driven down Jefferson Boulevard, I'm assuming. You know what it looks like now. What's it going to do with 4,000 more vehicles? Also, the resolution we just handed out, and on page 21 of the 2021-2029 Housing Element Update, policy HE P-5.4 states, the city will ensure that public facilities and services, water, sewer, and emergency services are available prior to occupancy. This has not happened on any of the projects that we have here. There is a restriction on the number of rooftops, as we stated, and we've been asking for it and haven't gotten it. I'd appreciate it if you guys would pull this, not approve it, don't recommend it, and make them start all over again. Thank you for your time. Have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Langford.
Danette Wigley.
Guess where I live? I live out there in that little cluster of homes that's being surrounded by this development. I also was at meetings in 2008, expressed my concern over density issues, traffic. It's insane to leave our neighborhood and go down Jefferson Boulevard at any busy time of day. It takes so long. I'm glad that we've got the new road in. I call it the new road. I've never learned Village Parkway. I'm glad we do have that, but to increase the density out there is just crazy to me, the thought of it. How in the world can you take an environmental, this is another point. How do you take an environmental impact study from so long ago, 2008, and just let it go through with smaller space, more housing? I feel like the wheels that are turning for the development, the city and the developer, everybody's working hard. I just want to make sure that it's done right. Once you develop on a piece of land like that, you can never, ever take it back. So please reconsider if you are getting ready to say yes and allow this extension. Reconsider it and think about the community that you've got almost landlocked out there with all these homes going in behind us, and making sure that we do it right the first time. I have to believe there were a lot of assumptions that were made with regard to traffic in 2008, and it's different now. And they've said so this evening, it's different. So please, please say no. Have the developer start over again with a new environmental impact study. That doesn't mean their plans have to be thrown out the window. They've already been agreed to a certain point. But let's start over and see if it's being done right.
Thank you.
Robin Davis.
Yeah. So this is another great example of our housing options taking too long to ever actually get built. We need more housing options now, which is why a tiny home on wheels ordinance would help our housing inventory much faster and without sprawl. For the master affordable housing agreement, I'll be curious to know how many low to moderate income housing would be included in this project. I know you said we'd be going over that at some point. I know the city also has a program that developers can just pay a fee that goes to the housing trust fund instead of having to build or having to include affordable housing units in their projects. So I don't know if that just depends on the size of the project. So would this program qualify for that fee, and how can we prevent that if possible? The luxury apartments on the river got away with not having to have, I believe it was 6 affordable units due to just paying a fee instead. So those are 6 less affordable units we could have had much sooner. Also, can I request tiny homes in this development for more diverse options? That'd be great. Lastly, I don't know, David, if you can now or later clarify what you meant about putting tiny homes on wheel ordinance on a future agenda and regarding council approval. That was a little unclear. And then I want to encourage anyone to join our West Sacramento Tiny Home Facebook group as well to learn and ask questions.
Thank you.
We have no additional requests to speak on item 7.
Okay, thank you. I will bring it back to the commission for discussion and deliberation.
Chair Sablon, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to respond. I think a couple things from Larry and Danny Langford. We did receive through our public stuff from Mr. Langford just back in January regarding the number of housing units that are existing in Southport currently, and that number is about 8,000 in round numbers in Southport currently. Probably there's been a little bit of building. You know, this is a 2000 American Community Survey data, so it's probably maybe a couple hundred more than that, but that's about where we're at right now, around 8,000. And regarding Resolution 0663, that was considered with the projects back in 2008, and it will be considered again if and when the revised project becomes forward to the Planning Commission. In summary, that resolution did provide some additional criteria by which major projects in Southport were to be evaluated above and beyond the sort of normal things. So that remains a resolution that is on the books and applicable unless it's ever rescinded. Also regarding Ms. Davis and the tiny home on wheels, if the city council provides direction to the city manager and staff to develop an ordinance or to do anything on that front, that is what we will do. But ultimately, that is a policy consideration by our decision makers. That's all I have at this time.
Thank you for those follow-ups, Mr. Tilley. Okay, so I will open up to the commission for deliberation.
Well, I don't want to feel, I feel like I'm monopolizing the discussion. I going through hearing everything, the thing that kind of keeps popping up to me that I keep writing down is this the same project? Is this the same project that the development agreement was reached in 2008? And I don't know. And I don't know. And is that what we're being asked tonight to approve? Is to approve that moving forward, to give that project with considerable differences a chance to continue to move on through the developmental process? That's kind of been the thing that keeps popping up for me. Is this the same project that was approved in 2008 that we're being asked to extend out? Considering that there's a lot of changes that need to take place in it. That's number one. Number two, I have concerns with the project as is, in terms of the impact that it's going to have on the community down that way. I mean, like I said, I do live down there, not quite in direct proximity, but close enough proximity to the project where it will definitely impact me and my family and how we are able to navigate around the area. So I guess I'm just looking for more direction or clarification on exactly what our decision here tonight actually, what's the impact that that's going to have on this project?
Well, it preserves the status quo as is. It does not authorize anything new or different than what was previously approved. So we are operating off an approved project that does have certain vested rights in by virtue of a development agreement. And those land uses and zoning were carried forth into general plan in 2016. So the question really before us on these projects, globally, is really how do we do them? What is the way to do them in the least impactful manner possible, and hopefully provide the most amount of benefit to the city at large? That will absolutely come with trade-offs. But this path we're on, even now, really started with the framework plan back in 1994 when decision makers at that time established a desire for growth in Southport in these areas, and at that time was assumed over 16,000 units would happen eventually. We're nowhere near that yet, and likely won't be for probably at least another decade or more. We lost a lot of years in between with the recession and flood protection needs. So tonight, this preserves the existing, will be your recommendation to preserve the existing development agreement, including the provisions that are in it. The project still needs a lot of work to ever come to fruition, and we are working on changes to it and have been for the last few years. They're just not really ripe yet. I think there was a request as part of public comment for a new environmental report and traffic study. Those have been done or in the works. So all of those things are happening. So tonight, which is really kind of a bridge, if you will, to keep this part going, to allow us a little more time to work on all the other stuff and bring that back to you. If the development agreement expires in January, the development could still happen. It's just some of the added components in that development agreement, as Seamus mentioned, which are beyond having a nexus requirement. All of that potentially could go away. Doesn't mean we can't negotiate more things, but right now, while we have them, we are recommending that we preserve that development agreement to preserve some of those benefits that were afforded in the development agreement that were negotiated at that time, and then agreed upon by this new landowner upon being assigned the rights and responsibilities of the development agreement. So if you move this tonight and the council moves it at a future meeting, nothing changes on the ground. The project still doesn't have a subdivision map yet. That wouldn't be another thing that would need to come before the Planning Commission, at a future date before anybody could think about actually developing anything. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on this project to kind of get it ready for prime time in 2023. But in this case, keeping this development agreement alive, staff believes is prudent for the city's interests going forward, and will provide us, this continue to be our basis for for our ongoing development agreement negotiations, rather than going back to square one. Because these negotiations, when I was negotiating this development agreement back then, I would sometimes sit in a room for 5-6 hours a day, 4 days a week, me against like 3 or 4 attorneys on behalf of the landowner, trying to hammer all of these things out. It's 100% negotiable, and in my view, this development agreement was relatively favorable to the city, which has not always been the case when we have done development agreements, over the years in our community. So there is some advantage here, and it doesn't change any of their other, all it does is change the term of the development agreement. It doesn't change any of the components of it. It does not allow for more units or less units or more land, any of that kind of stuff. So we feel it is a prudent decision at this point in time to keep the development agreement alive for a relatively short amount of time. I would anticipate we would be back before you with a revised or new development agreement in this 2-year time period anyway. So, but for now, given that the expiration is coming up in July, only a couple of months away, and this requires 2 stops at the City Council for final action by the City Council, that really is the basis for our recommendation to the Commission.
I have a follow-up question, Mr. Tilley. So am I to understand that beyond an approval today, should the commission decide to go that way, can a disapproval still happen on the project in its entirety?
Well, to the extent changes are discretionary approvals are required to effectuate those changes, which they likely would be. It certainly would be in the Planning Commission's authority, as well as the City Council's ultimate authority, to not approve those changes based on what discretionary approvals would be required. So there absolutely will be further discretionary approvals needed to effectuate this project in its current, whatever its ultimate form will be, based on the impacts of the levee footprint and other factors that have come along the way in all these years.
Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson?
I can appreciate why all of us are a little taken aback, simply because of the rather dramatic shift in the footprint, both of the levee as well as that hunk that is no longer part of the project as it is now. I have no problem, though, providing the staff with the time, and of course the developer, the time necessary to clean this thing up. But I have lots of questions about what it's going to look like when it gets down the road. But I can't say that I think it's appropriate to give the developer and the staff the time and necessary to do those changes that are subject to the policies of the council has provided, along with all of the changes that have taken place at the state level as well as the general plan. So I think this is something that is appropriate and would therefore make a motion to that effect to accept this recommendation. But I'm not ready to do that until all questions have been answered, so I'll stop there.
I tend to agree with my colleague. I'm satisfied with the information before us. I think that Commission staff's recommendation is just, and I think it's backed by the analysis that's been provided to us today. So I'm prepared to second any motion on the table.
Do any of the other commissioners have any comments or questions? Commissioner Squires?
I'm concerned about several things with regard to this. I am leaning toward saying yes on the request before us, but I am concerned about affordable housing and how that gets worked out in this project. I'm concerned about transportation issues. I'm concerned about school issues for the increasing population, and I feel like we have a lot of things to look at in the future. Right now, we're just talking about a 1-year extension, maybe 2 years, whatever the City Council decides. And I think we can do that, but I think we have a lot of questions for the future.
Yeah. Commissioner Olivares? Okay. So, yeah, I think if there aren't any further questions, we've heard a lot from the public. They want further review on this project, and the public will get that opportunity, and the commissioners have questions, and we will get that opportunity when the changes are brought forth before us. And this really is just preserving the status quo and preserving the benefits that the city had negotiated back in 2008. And there have been a lot of changes since then, and there will be further environmental review. So, I think, Commissioner Anderson, if you want to make your motion.
I'm happy to do it, but anyone can. I just recommend that we accept the staff recommendation. Do I need to read a specific of it, or what's the procedure here?
No, you can make your motion to move the staff recommendation.
That's what I will do.
A motion by Commissioner Anderson to move forward with staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Olivares. Ms. Flores, can you do the roll call, please?
Commissioner Wong?
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Linker,
Aye.
Commissioner Olivares,
Aye.
Commissioner Squires,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jackson,
Aye.
Chair Sablon.
Aye. With that, the motion passes, and this will move to City Council. Moving to Administration Function Part 2. Any commissioner communications?
I wasn't sure if this was the time, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge and thank our outgoing planning commissioners for all of their hard work, dedication, and their ongoing commitment to this community. So we're all new in this role, and I'm sure we're going to feel a lot of the workload impact and the heavy decisions we have before us. But I just wanted to go on the record and thank those that came before us.
And I think with that, I will welcome all the new commissioners on here. I think you heard today a lot of discussion and deliberation, and I think we have a good group up here, and we have a lot of projects coming forward that are going to be longer meetings, I think. Okay. With that, if no further communications, meeting is adjourned for tonight.